Alehoorn claims that marriage played a significant role in Viking society. Norse or Viking weddings brought together not only the bride and husband but also both of their families. To escape the snowy winters that made it impossible to travel to the wedding location, wedding celebrations were typically conducted in the summer and lasted a week. The bride and groom didn't communicate much before the ceremony because the families planned the unions. Vikings wed for political and financial reasons, but marriage also allowed for the chance of having biological children. In Viking days, being able to have children was essential because the more children a family had, the more land they could farm and the more wealth they could amass. Planning for a Norse wedding took years. In addition to making sure that their visitors had enough to eat and a place to stay, they also had to ensure that the ceremony took place at a precise time. Stay glued to find out more about some of the strange Viking wedding traditions. Welcome to History Mysteries topic, 13 strange Viking wedding traditions and rituals. Let's get right into it. Here are 13 strange Viking weddings traditions that will leave you puzzled. 1. Weddings had to be on a Friday. The day of Frigg, the deity of marriage, love, and fertility, was Friday, also known as Frigga's Day, and it was the traditional day for Viking weddings. The goddess Frigg was married to Odin, one of the main Norse gods who was frequently linked to poetry, magic, battle, wisdom, and other positive traits. As you can see, both Frigg and Odin were significant Norse deities, and they each had a designated day of the week. To venerate the goddess of marriage, the Vikings decided to have their weddings on Fridays. 2. Maidenhood rituals. In order to prepare the brides for marriage, other married female relatives and acquaintances, such as their mothers and married sisters, would attend. To metaphorically wash away her maiden status, the bride would purify herself in a bathhouse. Unquestionably, they respected cleanliness. Scandinavian women adorned their tresses with a kransen, a circlet that represented their virginity. They stored the circlet for the bride's future daughter and replaced the kransen with a bridal crown during the wedding ritual. 3. Sword ceremonies. The same way that the bride's married female friends and relatives attended, the groom's fathers, married brothers, and married friends also attended. The males, as opposed to the women, took part in a symbolic sword ceremony where they would steal a blade from the grave of one of their ancestors. The blade had been buried by the groom's attendants. This ceremony represents the groom's passing from boyhood to manhood. The groom would bathe himself in a bathhouse, just like the bride, to represent washing away his single status. As you can see, both the bride's and the groom's families played a major role in planning the ceremony. 4. Exchange of swords. The bride and groom must trade blades in addition to rings. Now, I understand what you're thinking. What kind of marriage entails using weapons, and how does that work? People typically picture wedding bands when they think of weddings, not swords. However, to the Vikings, the exchange of swords at weddings represented the passing of security from the groom's family to the bride's family. They would trade ancient weapons that belonged to their own families. It also brought together the two families, who were now in charge of looking out for and defending one another. They kept the blades in storage for later use. Each sword's hilt was adorned with the wedding bands from the hand. Exchanging rings served as a symbol of the couple's union, much like it does today, even though it was less significant than the sword ritual. 5. Massive feasts. Massive feasts were held by the Vikings and played a significant role in wedding festivities. The feast was always hosted following the wedding ceremony, and the menu was typically chosen by the families. We don't know a lot about the specific foods they would consume at the enormous feast. We do know that their largest feasts typically included seafood and meat in addition to other delectable foods. 6. Getting drunk was a must. The bride and groom would eat a lot of delicious cuisine and drink a lot of alcohol after they got married. They would savor their drinks from a cup known as a beloved cup, to further represent their union. They had to get wasted, and this practice is also referred to as wedding ale. Additionally, the mead caused their visitors to become inebriated. As you can see, getting drunk to honor the couple's marriage was a requirement, so none of them had a choice. 7. Their gods had to be honored. It makes sense that the Vikings would go to any lengths to please the Norse gods and win their approval given how essential they were to them. As previously mentioned, Viking nuptials were held on Fridays to honor Frigg, the goddess of marriage, but Frigg wasn't the only deity that was significant in their wedding rituals. You have undoubtedly heard of Thor, the thunder deity and Odin's son. He is best known for his hammer, which is also called Mjolnir in Norse folklore. 8. Handfasting ceremony. Do you know what a handfasting ritual is? Pagan weddings frequently included handfasting rituals. The ancient Celts most likely originated this technique, but the Vikings also adopted it. The officiant binds the couple and performs their marriage while the couple's wrists are tied together with cords or cloths. In a sense, they are sealing the knot. Additionally, this custom was significant to the Vikings because it demonstrated that the pair was choosing to get married rather than being forced to. Unbelievably, handfasting continues to be a common custom in many European societies today. Today, some partners bind their hands on the big day with scarves they knitted together. Some people even join their hands during the ritual using handkerchiefs that once belonged to deceased loved ones. 9. Animal sacrifices. Surprisingly, Vikings offered animal sacrifices to their fertility gods in order to obtain their favors. It was time for the wedding service to start after the premarital rites were completed. The bride's family gave the groom's family a dowry during the wedding ritual. Then they started a sacred ritual in which they would call the deities. Incantation and animal sacrifices may have been a part of this rite. Animals that are connected to fertility spirits were sacrificed. They butchered an animal for Thor. They offered the sacrifice of a female adult pig to Freya, the deity of love, fertility, war, and death, Sow. And they presented a horse or a boar to Freyr, the deity of harmony, fertility, rain, and sunshine. Usually, the animal was sacrificed by the Gothi, the individual in charge of the wedding. The blood was collected in a receptacle, which was then set on an altar. Then, to acquire the favor of their gods, they would take some fir twigs and dip them into the bowl of animal blood. 10. Bride running rituals. Bride running, also referred to as the bryllup, was a custom that included competitive foot sprinting. The relatives of the bride and groom would rush to the mead hall after the ceremony. For the remainder of the bridal festivities, the family that lost would have to serve drinks to the family that arrived first. 11. Hair as a symbol of sexuality. The Vikings placed great importance on bridal hair because it represented the bride's sexuality. Even more significant than the bridal gown was this. The bride, as previously mentioned, wore a wedding crown that she received from her mother. They added numerous embellishments to the crown. Flowers, straw, wood, crystals, and any other significant materials that were on hand were used to adorn the bridal crown. The better off the pair was, the longer the hair was and the more ornaments it had. The grooms carried a Thor symbol and donned elaborate clothing. Thor is represented by swords and hammers. These were encouraging signs for a solid union. 12. Wedding clothing. Oddly enough, the Vikings were more concerned with the hair than the bridal attire. It's likely that brides wore vivid red dresses because red was a popular hue at the time. Blue, green, and yellow were some of the other fashionable hues at the time. Therefore, Viking marriages were vibrant occasions. 13. Viking honeymoon. Ever ponder where the term honeymoon originated? The consumption of honey mead in Norway is where it originated, after all. 6 people would escort the lovers to their bridal bed after the wedding festivities were over so they could consummate their marriage. The couple would receive enough honey mead from friends and relatives to last them for a month, moon cycle. It was intended to enhance the likelihood of conception during the first month of marriage. The aforementioned Viking wedding customs are definitely fascinating. Remember to like and subscribe to this channel, hit the bell button for easy notifications.